we're going to leave that down until we're ready for it, okay? Thank you. I want to talk to you about grist for the mill. Grist for the mill. When you come to a quarter of Summit University, or 8 weeks as it is, you experience in part what the community is going through. That is grist for the mill. You experience the astrology of yourself and of the community as a whole, the church as a whole. Those of you who are into astrology know that there is an astrology for everything. What time and day you signed a contract to purchase your home, your car, what time your baby was born, so on and so forth. So the specific and most important moments of our life are key, and we need to keep a notebook of the time, the day when we conceived an idea, when we decided to bring that idea into manifestation, when we fulfilled a certain level of our plan on that matter, and so forth. So that is grist for the mill. The astrology of your life is grist for the mill, because it is telling you what is happening day by day, and if you want to calculate the best time for certain events to happen, you look at your astrology chart. You don't have to be an astrologist. You can pay someone to tell you in a year in advance of all the best times and the worst times that can be upon you. If you know that, it's like lighting a candle in the dark. If you don't know that, you're walking in darkness, because you have no idea what the planets are doing, what their influences are. The Earth has a magnetic field, so does the Moon, the Sun, and the asteroid belt and the planets of this system. So a magnetic field, the aura of ourselves, is a small manifestation of the larger auras of the planets. Though the planets in their auras, their magnetic field, contain the records of all evolutions that have ever lived on those planets, if any, and the record of their karma. That's how the various planets get their identities, by the evolutions who have resided there and who have either brought darkness or light to those planets. So why are we talking about this? We're talking about a kind of mapping, a mapping of our lives. We must map our lives, else we are walking without a candle. We're groping here and there. We say, oh, this is a good idea, I think I'll go and do this. Oh, that's not such a good idea, I think I've changed my mind. Where there's no mapping, there's no focus, there's no concentration of energy, and I can tell you that most of us have gone through many, many lifetimes without real focus, except the fact that we were burdened by our karma. And being burdened by our karma, we were prisoners of our karma, and to a certain extent we are still prisoners of our karma. I was thinking today about the fact that 100 or 200 years ago, before modern medicine, being blessed by Saint Germain, gave us access to all kinds of cures for all kinds of incurable diseases. And I was thinking to myself, if Saint Germain and the Lords of Karma had not interceded, many of us would have a lifespan of about 30 years or 35 years. You were considered old at that age 200 years ago in the French Revolution. You would not have had recourse through modern medicine to have contacts so you could see, eyeglasses that would be effective for a lifetime, and all of the things that you can conceive of. The ages were very, very dark until the coming of Saint Germain. Jesus Christ brought in his light for a 2,150-year dispensation, and the earth has still to realize what he really taught and how his teachings can be applied. So grist for the mill is also what happens to me in my day-to-day existence while I'm here at Summit University teaching you. So I wanted to give you a teaching that comes out of an experience that I had yesterday. How many of you are aware of the fact that you can determine when someone is sending malicious energy toward you? How you can detect that that is happening by a change in your physical body? You can say it out loud if you want to. Someone said the ear. Does anyone have anything else to say? What? Yeah, feelings in the solar plexus, right? You can feel a sword in your heart. How about a drop in energy? Sudden energy drop because you've contacted someone or they've contacted your energy. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened to me yesterday. I was talking to a not so near relative who had called me because they wanted me to make arrangements for certain events to happen in their family. And this person is not someone I talk to very frequently with, but on this occasion it was necessary. It was a very pleasant conversation. The discussion surrounded his studies, his work, what he was doing, how grateful he was to me to insist that he get higher education, that his wife had gotten higher education, and so forth. He was being very polite. Hail fellow, well met. Everything went fine. I hung up the phone, and instantaneously my left ear was red. Now I want to tell you what I do when I get a left ear that is red. First of all, I'll tell you what a red left ear is. A red left ear is somebody is talking about you maliciously. There is no question about it. It is happening. Don't doubt it. It is a very clear sign that God gives you through that left earlobe. It's always the left earlobe when it is malicious. So, years ago, I used to have this happening to me all the time. And I said, this has got to stop. So I decided that any time I would have a hot left ear, I would pull out my sword and give fiats and demand that that energy, which was not my energy, return to the source. And I might not be able to identify the source, and maybe I can, depending on if it correlates with some other event, and I can put two and two together and say, okay, this is this person's vibration. You can't always do that. So I decided that I was not going to allow a single person on earth to send negative energy at me without serious consequences. So I would get out my sword, and I do it whenever this happens. It happens extremely infrequently at this point. And I promise you that will happen to you also. Since I'm a public figure and a target, I can get energy from a lot of places, and I can get it frequently. So I no sooner hung up the phone that this started, so I said to myself, well, he's hung up the phone and he's talking to his to personnel in his office or whatever about me probably being a cult leader and all of these things. Perfectly gracious on the telephone, of course. So I got out my sword and I demanded that the energy go back to the owner. It is not my energy. I do not need to be put upon in any way. They must deal with their energy, and they must know the consequences of directing that energy at me or any part of life. I got out my sword and I made the calls, and it doesn't take me very long to clear energy. It took me 10 minutes. That's a long time. It took me 10 minutes to clear this energy off of me. But while I was clearing the energy and I called to Archangel Michael to deliver me, I realized that coincidentally there was a cycle in this person's astrology where a certain portion of the judgment, of his own judgment for his own evil doings, had come upon him. Now, I don't go after individuals just for any old reason that I think they need the judgment. I call for the judgment in general of all fallen angels whose time is up. I'm not seeking the judgment of people in embodiment. I mean, that's nothing I'm interested in doing, because God is their judge and He will deal with their karma. But when someone is attacking me, I have a right to defend myself. So in the course of defending myself, I saw that this person was due for a certain karmic recompense. A certain portion of his karma would be descending. I would have nothing to do with it myself. I was simply the observer. And I thought that Linello allowed this to happen in this sequence so that I would know that there was a certain judgment pending upon this one, and also, of course, so that I would deal with the energy sent to me. So I recommend that you all have an Archangel Michael sword because it works. And I would like to demonstrate for you the way I would clear someone who is directing malice at me and dealing with it. I also want to point out that when the heat first comes upon you, you may say, you know, is the temperature too high in the heat? You know, why am I so hot? You start feeling your ears. Is one ear hotter than the other? And as the moments go by, it gets much hotter. It gets really bright red. You can look in the mirror and see this big bright red earlobe. You can poke it a little bit and feel the heat literally coming off of it. Now, I think this is a tremendous dispensation from God, who can alert us where? At the orifice of the ear, where we should be listening, right? This is a listening ear. We listen to God through our ears. That's why we keep our ears very, very clean at Summit University. We don't want any wax in our ears because we want to hear the voice of God. And our ears work for us. We are instruments of God. So when you finally say, you know, I can't believe this, but it's happening, so it must be happening, so I better do something about it. I say that every time this goes on. You know, I can always hardly believe it why people spend their lives engaging in gossip, but they do. So at the point where I have defined this, then I go after this with a vengeance. Believe me, no holds barred. This energy is going back to its source. Now, I'm telling you this because I don't want you to have downtime any day for the rest of your life. I don't want you to have downtime because you eat stupid combinations of food. I don't want you to have downtime because you waste your time chatting and chittering and all that stuff, or going to movies that aren't worth seeing, or going to events that aren't worth being there for when you can be accomplishing tremendous things for your soul and the planet. I want you to have fun, be happy, laugh, and have good times, but focus. Focus on your mission now that you know that you have such a stupendous mission. And let nothing interfere with your mission. And that is Linello's message to you today. You cannot let any minor demon who's so low on the totem pole that you should be ashamed that he has upset you at all. Whether a minor demon or an archdevil or a fallen angel of the highest order. It doesn't matter. Because you are not the one who vanquishes this evil or this gossip or this red ear or this fallen one. You call upon the hosts of the Lord and they take care of the fallen ones. Remember, your job is to make the call, keep yourself balanced and clear, very clear and centered. You can't be clear and centered if you're eating the wrong food. Everybody is responsible for his own diet. You have to take responsibility for your bodies. So this is the example. I'm going to face the altar when I do this because I always do. Both lighting the heart of God. Bind this force. Bind this state of consciousness. Drive it back to the owner. Drive it back into the very cause and core of that individual. Both letting that call for the full power of Archangel Michael. Raise the light through. Raise the light through. Both lighting into the cause and core of this attack upon my soul, my body, and my mission. I demand the binding of it. Bind it now. Bind it now. Bind it now and let the will of God be done. Raise the lightning through. Raise the lightning through. Raise the lightning through. Raise the lightning through. In the name of Jesus Christ, I accept it on this hour in full power. Amen. Now when I tackle this, I don't stop until my ear is cool. As I mentioned, it took me 10 minutes yesterday. You can say a lot of decrees in 10 minutes. A lot of decrees. But I think it was about 10 to 15 minutes before this was over. Now I want to give you another example of grist for the mill. Okay? You can have a notebook of grist for the mill in this class. This was some days after the conference, not too long after the conference. When the conference is over, I feel spent, not tired, spent. I have spent my light and my energy, and now I have to regroup. So that's what I've been doing, regrouping myself and making sure we get the pearls out on deadline and so forth. So someone telephoned me who had brought members of his family to the conference, and a daughter in the family had a husband who was absolutely vicious against me and vicious against the church and the path and the teachings. And so he was just in the gall of bitterness, very angry. So the father drove to their home in a distant state and to try and support his daughter and reason with the son-in-law. And so he called me up and he said, now, should I get involved in this? Should I not get involved? So I began telling him, some basic points I thought the daughter needed to be aware of. And so I gave him the advice that he needed. But in the course of the phone call, I was doing several things and listening to him, but I had to be moving a bit here and there. And what I did is I knocked my left shin into a drawer that came out of a built-in shelf. And it had it standing open, and I turned around quickly, and I ripped up the skin of my shin bone. Left side. Left side. So I asked someone to quick get me some ice. I held some ice on it, and I went on the conversation. I didn't bother telling the person on the phone what was going on because, it was my problem, not his problem. So the conversation concluded. He was very happy with the advice he gave, and then I said goodbye, and I looked at this situation and I said, he told me that he was outside of the house of the son-in-law, and the son-in-law was ranting and raving. So what happened was, he didn't deal with the energy of his son-in-law. He actually, not consciously, passed it on to me by discussing the whole situation. So he became a conduit for the immense anger of his son-in-law directed toward me and the church. And I allowed myself to be vulnerable to that. And so that is a lesson that we all have to learn, that a tremendous amount of anger comes through people who rage against the church and the path and the teachings. God bless them. They could be demon-possessed by this time because they've been so angry at God and the church because of their family situation for so long that sometimes they're no longer even sane. They have moments of insanity and tremendous rage. So since I happen to be the target of all of this, I was vulnerable to it because I'm allowing this person to talk to me without setting up my defenses first, without even thinking about it. So I want this to be a lesson to you that you are always prepared and always have your armor on 24 hours a day. When you go to bed at night, you put your armor on. You can say a fiat to Archangel Michael if you get up in the night or if you're not able to sleep. And you say your fiats to Archangel Michael and your tube of light as soon as you awaken in the morning. After you write down in your notepad that it's at your bed table or at bedside, you write down the notes of things you remember just before you're opening your eyes, coming back from the retreats, or having an unusual dream that is giving you an interpretation of an experience or a relationship and so forth. So the interesting thing is that I really didn't have the karma to have this accident. I put the ice on the shin bone, and for the first time in my life of ever having hurt my limbs, which is many times, it never turned black and blue. It just healed right up, just fine. Because really, it was not my karma to have this experience. So that's interesting, and you need to realize that the force is always lying in wait to catch you at a vulnerable moment. I'm somewhat vulnerable when I'm spent after a conference. So the next thing I'd like to tell you is that the invocation that I made today is your very first clearance at Summit University. It's a very simple clearance, but a very powerful clearance. And I named a lot of things that I wanted to have you cleared of so that Lynella could teach you today. So each time I come in, I will be making invocations for you as well as for the world. So you now know that I would like to teach, and I will teach, from Jesus, CEO, using ancient wisdom for visionary leadership. We come to Summit University to be followers and to be leaders. We need to be both, and we need to know when to switch gears. We need to know when we're in the presence of someone who has more understanding, advanced education in a field than we do. I have great respect for many people on my staff who are PhDs and who know far more than I do about their fields. In that case, I defer to them and what they have to say about their recommendations for the organization. So always know when you are in the presence of someone who is wise, you can learn from them. Always know when you are in the presence of someone that you can assist because you have perhaps a better understanding than that person does of the subject at hand. So remember to switch gears, and don't make yourself look foolish by being very important in the presence of a very important person when you should be listening instead of talking. People who talk too much show their ignorance. Be wise listeners. I don't want my students of Summit University to make this faux pas. You don't want to make this faux pas of listening when you should be listening. Not listening when you should be listening. So the book that goes along with this that I think that you really need to have is a copy of the Scofield King James Version of the Bible, the Red Letter Edition. When you have the Red Letter Edition of the Bible, you can then read every word that is recorded in the New Testament that Jesus spoke. You can read his words again and again during this time, and you can see how this writer so well has documented Jesus that we can understand. So I'd like to read to you from this book and comment on it, and start at the very first place, which is the introduction. Are you comfortable? It's not too cool? In the Buddhist tradition, we self-observe. We are observing our thoughts, our feelings, our moods, our emotions, our actions, our interchanges with people, and evaluating. Have we been kind in our communication? Have we been rough? Have we said all that needed to be said? Have we comforted to the extent that someone has needed comforting? Sometimes we only have one chance, and only one chance, to help someone because we will never see that person again. And upon our comfort and our support and our presence, this person will make a right turn in his life and start going uphill rather than downhill. Believe in the God in people and tell them that you recognize their strengths. Many people do not know their strengths. They do not know their strengths, but you see them, you know them. And when they're feeling low and burdened, tell them, you have a tremendous gift in what you are doing. I so appreciate what you are and who you are in our community or in our town or in the fire department or on the police force. Always remember to commend, to love, and to uphold the soul of everyone whom you meet. And never exaggerate, and do not flatter, but find something beautiful and truthful that you can say to someone, I really admire this quality of yours. It will make that person's day and perhaps change his life. Don't be stingy with this kind of communication. Everyone needs it. Everyone needs to be told, yes, you're on the right course and you're doing a terrific job. So, introduction. Perhaps you've heard about the alpha management style, the one based on the masculine authoritative use of power. Perhaps you have also heard about the beta management style, the one based on the feminine cooperative use of power. In this book, I will introduce what I call the omega management style, the style that incorporates and enhances them both. Jesus, CEO, using ancient wisdom for visionary leadership, is based on 3 major premises. I like to mark up my books. Don't hesitate to mark your books. They help you remember things and help you study if you have a quiz. 1. One person trained 12 human beings who went on to so influence the world that time itself is now recorded as being before BC or after AD, his existence. One person trained 12 human beings. Every one of you here, when you leave Summit University, can impart what you learned to 12 human beings. Think about that. This person worked with a staff that was totally human and not divine, a staff that in spite of illiteracy, questionable backgrounds, fractious feelings, and momentary cowardice, went on to accomplish the tasks he trained them to do. They did this for one main reason: to be with him again. 3. His leadership style was intended to be put to use by any of us. How would you like to walk out of Summit University with the leadership style of Jesus Christ? And it's the Omega Divine Mother way. Isn't that wonderful? The idea of Jesus as a Chief Executive Officer, CEO, came to me 20 years ago when I was living in the mountains. It struck me at the time that Jesus had many feminine values in management, and that his approach with his staff often ran counter to other management styles and techniques I had both witnessed and experienced. As I started my own advertising agency 10 years later and began to encounter businesses on many different levels, I was dismayed to find countless homeless people in corporations. I too often saw invaluable human energy and intelligence untapped and underutilized. I saw multiple examples of corporate abuse, neglect, and violence. I decided to write this book to help turn the tide and to empower people in all layers of leadership to review the divine excellence in themselves and in those they serve. I also found it disturbing that nearly all leadership and management books are written by men, yet women are the fastest growing segment of business owners in this country. USA Today recently reported that soon women will employ more than all the Fortune 500 companies combined. Similarly, nearly 80% of all businesses in the United States employ 20 people or less. Clearly, small groups of people led by innovative leaders and managers make up the strength and hope of this nation. With the business world changing so rapidly and so drastically, it seemed to me that we need creative and innovative role models now more than ever before. I believe the world is crying out for leaders whose goals are to build up, not to tear down, to nurture, not to exploit, to undergird and enhance rather than to dominate. Jesus as a leader struck me as the noblest of them all. I believe Jesus' Omega management style incorporates and transcends the best of the alpha masculine and beta feminine leadership styles. Because by harnessing spiritual energy, each of us, female and male, can become the empowered leaders that the next millennium will require. The empowered leaders. The Master talked about empowerment at this class. To those who are looking for tips on how to make a fast buck or get a quick management fix, this book will have little or no relevance. I am searching for people who are willing to plant the fields that lead to the harvest and who recognize that the workplace where most of us spend the greater part of our lives is indeed very holy and fertile ground. The workplace is holy ground. This is a secular person talking. Let's make our workplace, which is often our home when we're homemakers, holy ground. I will tell you what I'm drinking. How many wondered what I was drinking? Okay, what I'm drinking is Bancha tea. Into the Bancha tea, into 8 cups of Bancha tea, I put 1 tea bag of Kali tea, which has much too much caffeine in it to drink it in just 1 cup. So I use 1 Kali tea bag for 8 cups of Bancha tea, and it puts a small amount of caffeine in the drink. Very small amount. But it's just a little better than the plain Bancha. It's also good for the throat. And Bancha tea is known to be good for the digestion. Okay, you can get your mind off the tea. The selection process. In your humanness, you might hope your new staff will have the powers of angels, but the first one pointed out to you smells not like heavenly phosphorus, but like mud and dead fish. The next one is not drawn from the halls of a university, but is out collecting taxes in the name of the government that everyone hates. The selection process continues. Your staff and followers are plucked from trees, back alleys, and down at the pier. And as you gaze on your chosen few, you realize that this group will outlive you and must carry out the task you cannot accomplish without them, to change the world. You have 3 years to train them. What do you do? This is the question that faced Jesus, a young leader, a leader who, like many of us, had to depend on others to accomplish a goal. In studying Jesus' leadership techniques, I began to realize that he, the original Omega leader, had 3 categories of strengths. Strength of self-mastery. I believe that everyone sitting here can master some facet of himself or herself and begin the process today, and with determination achieve that 1 point of self-mastery. We think of someone as having who has self-mastery, who has mastery of everything in their world and in their lives. But it doesn't work that way, does it? We come in with a talent, a major talent, a minor talent, and if we've been diligent in many past lives and brought back our talents with us, we may have more. But most people have 1 thing that they do with excellence, if they're lucky to have been educated to do that thing and if they've been surrounded by it as a child. So you don't have to wait till you become an ascended master to have self-mastery. You need to write down on your notebook right now, what points of self-mastery do I have? The discipline of time, the discipline of space. Think about it. Think about it through this entire quarter. If you take note that you do not have mastery in a certain area and you're quite sure that you can overcome it in the next 8 weeks, then work on it every day. I've made commitments to God of things that I wanted to do, like not eating certain substances and so forth. And sometimes I have gone back to the altar 3 or 4 or 5 times to once again ask for Jesus' intercession to assist me in this particular challenge. And combined with my determination and the Lord's intercession, I would reach a level where this area of my life was no longer a burden and no longer a problem. So you need to claim your mastery in areas, because you know why? It makes you feel good when you look at the list, at how many things you've really mastered in this life. I mean, some people have raised whole families and run businesses and all their kids are great and successful and all kinds of things. You know, that suggests your self-mastery. So write it down, because the devil is always trying to tell you that you're no good and don't know how to do anything. No, you know how that goes. Strength of self-mastery the strength of action, to act at the time that you must act. In other words, if there is action, there is timing in action. The people who have timing in action are those who buy property at the right time, make money on it in the Depression, pre-Depression. When they knew about it, they bought up, square miles of land and became millionaires and billionaires to this day. Timing. The strength of action is timing. So put timing down on this page we're on. The strength of relationships. Do you give in your relationships so that you have a bonding with many people because you give and you care and you reach out and you touch people's hearts? Currently, you may be strong in only one or two of these areas, yet success in management requires the total combination: self-mastery, strength of action, strength of relationships. For example, a physician who has self-mastery and action skills but lacks relationship skills will be limited in his/her career. Likewise, we are all too familiar with the downfall of political leaders who had relationship and action skills but lacked the strength in the area of self-mastery. The goal of this book is to heighten your awareness level in each category and to assist you in the process of mastering them all. Do not hold it. I'll tell you. So we're beginning the first chapter. He said, I am. Please say it. I am. Put the emphasis on the am. I am. I am. I am. I am. I ask you to say this first thing in the morning. Affirm your being in God and as God. It will help you define yourself and define other people. What if Jesus did not instantly know who he was or what his gifts were? What if it dawned on him only gradually as it dawns on each of us? Maybe his mother recited stories of the unusual events surrounding his birth. Maybe she set the beautiful boxes the 3 wise men brought him on a shelf in his room, and at night the young boy would take them down and hold them and wonder. Or perhaps he knew instantly that he had a special calling and was just waiting the moment when his powers could be set free. Either way, I believe Jesus had to go into the wilderness to find out who he was. That a wilderness experience was as much a part of his shaping and destiny as it is of yours and mine. I think you all know that the government land that goes beyond the National Forest Service land is called wilderness land here. We are in official wilderness land and surrounded by it. There's the Absaroka wilderness, there are various wildernesses, but there are millions of acres of land that will never be touched and that will be called wilderness. It's very interesting since Jesus led us to this property. I was once involved in a meeting of real estate developers who were gathered to discuss a possible joint venture. Each developer had an impressive resume in terms of the task to be accomplished. Much to our surprise, the organizer of the group stood and began to describe in detail one of his greatest failures. He talked about how his eagerness to make money for his investors had caused him to overlook some important details about public opinion trends. He said, I am much more careful now to get all the facts before acting on my ideas. The person next to him then, with a slightly red face, admitted that on occasion he had not exactly been a genius either. In fact, he once purchased a huge parcel of land for development that was, unbeknownst to him, sitting on solid rock. The youngest member of the group was reluctant to speak when it was his turn to share his mistake. He sort of fumbled around and said, well, everyone knows I've had many successes. The leader gently chided him, come on, Charlie, put your rock out on the table. If you have not experienced failure, you cannot be a part of this group. What the leader was really saying was, if you have not been tested by fire, you do not know who you are. And if you do not know who you are, you cannot be a leader. When Mark Prophet took his ascension in 1973, he had trained me for 12 years, and so had El Morya. But when that hour came, I was left to make all the decisions, to run the organization, to determine whether we go to Idaho or Los Angeles, whether I go stumping or do this or do that. Thousands of decisions fall upon you when you come to the head of an organization. I made some mistakes by allowing others to dominate me, and I think that most women have experienced that at some time in their lives, where you allow someone, and sometimes it's an authoritarian male. In this case, it was a group of very authoritarian males who all saw themselves as inheriting the mantle of Llanello. They thought they were next in line. It's a very interesting thing, but I don't know how many of you realize this, that when you read the story of Arthur and his knights, and Arthur, the young boy, goes to pull the sword out of the stone, the real story is that Arthur could not pull the sword from the stone until he had defeated 12 black knights. And he went to war and went to battle. He might have early pulled the sword from the stone as a boy, but he did not have the power of the sword until he defeated these black knights. And so he was engaged in war for a long time. And I had to wrestle with these young men who thought that they were the natural heirs of the organization. And it was a time, I think, that I, as a woman, had to become masculine, very masculine, in order to preserve the organization and my authority as the leader of that organization, which I was appointed to. But those were very difficult times for me, to wrestle with such strong individuals who used subterfuge, calumny, and all kinds of things to try to manipulate me in that hour of bereavement and that time of having 4 small children. So the mantles come upon us when we least expect them. I expected it because I was trained for it, but you never really know what it's going to feel like when it falls on your shoulder. So being tested, we have to be tested. Until we're tested, we really don't know what we're made of, do we? What perspective do we have? What feedback? What can we see in the mirror? How can we see ourselves if we haven't made some serious mistakes? The things that have taught me the most in my life are my mistakes. My victories, they just keep going and they're fine and I don't even review them. But when the mistakes come along, I get deeply sorrowful and very concerned, and I analyze the whole situation. What went wrong? Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? And I don't leave it until I have extracted the lesson from it. So don't walk away from your burdens. Extract the lesson of your burdens. If you don't know who you are, you can't be a leader. If you don't know your strength, if you don't know how far you have the strength to hold and still hold and still hold and not give up and not give in, you have to know what your staying power is. I know what my staying power is. I definitely know what my staying power is. And there's no way, by the grace of God, that anyone is going to take from us our organization, our church, our right to religious freedom, and so on and so forth. So in the wilderness, Jesus was given clear choices, each relating to his special gifts. When the devil said, "Worship me and you will own the world," Jesus said, "No." The devil said, "Then satisfy your hunger and turn these stones into bread." Again, Jesus said, "No." "Throw yourself off the pinnacle of the temple and test your power to spring back to eternal life." Jesus looked Satan in the face and said, "No." And finally, after 40 days of being tested, 40 days with this devil nipping at your heels, constantly after you, constantly jeering you, constantly getting you to use your powers incorrectly. So after 40 days of being tested and refined in that desert furnace, a person emerged who was very clear about who he was and what he was called to do. And remember, he fasted the entire time. His strength was spiritual. Jesus met the temptation to use his gifts selfishly, and he overcame them. Now you will have to pass this test. So I want to read it to you again. Worship me and you will own the world. You can face some powerful person, some wealthy person, who is going to offer you some fantastic deal. But there's something a little bit not right about this deal. It's not quite honest. It's not quite above board. But you think, but look at all the money I could make for the church. I could give all this money to the church if I did this. So what does it matter if I just am a little bit not quite above board here? I'm trying to point out to you that temptation is subtle. And the longer you're on the path, the more difficult are your choices. Because the difference between right and wrong begins to blur. So he offered him the world. And I've mentioned this before, and some of you who have been through several levels may remember me having said this. But I'm going to tell you this again because I could hardly believe this. We were on a summer trip with our family. We stopped in Salt Lake, and we went to visit the Mormon premises, their facilities, and took the tour and so forth. And as we were walking there, and I think we came to one of the places where there was a mural of Jesus, and it was kind of a hall that was circular, and the stairs went down in circular fashion. And at that point, I heard the angel Moroni, who is the angel that's at the top of every Mormon temple. This angel Moroni, I always call him a moron. This angel Moroni said to me, preach the teachings of the Mormon church and I will make you famous throughout the world. This is what he said to me. You know, what a dope, you know. How did he think he was going to influence me? I mean, he really is a dope. And he kept after me the whole time I was on that property. And I had to say, get thee behind me, Satan. I mean, this is a fallen angel that sits on top of the spires of every Mormon church that's built throughout the world. So, don't let devils use you. Know who you are. Worship me and you will own the world. Jesus said no, the devil said. Then satisfy your hunger and turn these stones to bread. In other words, become a magician. Become a magician just like me. Use your powers not for healing, cleansing the lepers, raising the dead, so forth. Throw yourself off the pinnacle and test your power to spring back to eternal life. It is not lawful for us to cast down our lives. Jesus met the temptation to use his gifts selfishly, and he overcame them. It is no coincidence that only after the wilderness experience did Jesus begin to use the words, I am, when describing himself. Now, if you have a red letter edition of the Bible, you can find all the I am statements of Jesus. And I'm sure this author is correct. I haven't looked it up. In the Old Testament, when the Jews asked God for a self-description, the only answer they received was, I am that I am. The simplicity of this phrase emphasized his power to them. The words I am therefore reflect all the creative power in the universe. When you say I am that I am, you're really saying I am who I am. And that's what God was saying. And he was saying, I will be what I will be, and you will know me in the outpicturing of events. As I lead you, as I guide you, as I speak to you, you will know me by my actions. And that is the only way you can define God, is by his acts. The acts of God. People talk about hurricanes, floods, as acts of God. There are many acts of God. Many of them are beneficial, but many of them are not. So here is a question, and I would like each of you in your notebooks to consider the questions at the end of each chapter, and then leave space, large enough space in your notebooks, to reflect on those questions as we go through the book, because you might evolve different answers. What wilderness experience has helped you see your gifts more clearly? A wilderness experience can be a tough marriage, a nasty divorce, a lost business, loss of money, loss of a child in death or injury. A wilderness experience is a stripping experience. Jesus had nothing but his robe, his loincloth. He fasted. So the wilderness experience is you against the backdrop of God. You and God. And it's where you define your personhood in God, and from that moment on, you conquer till the last day of your life the victory of this embodiment and hopefully your ascension. Question 2. Why don't we number these so that as we go through the book, if I say question number 33, we'll know where to find it. We can turn to it. Because we should review these as our consciousness is changing. List in detail each of your own I ams. Define yourself by, if you can say, I am compassionate, I am kind. The virtues that you feel you have embodied in part, that you may increase and enrichen by being here. What are your I ams? I am so-and-so, I have a name. I was born somewhere. I had parents. Who are my I ams? I'm the child of so-and-so. This is my background. This is my genealogy. This is where I came from. These are my I ams. What is your identity in this world? And then what is your identity as this world merges into the spiritual world and the path and your ascension? What are your I ams? Every I am is like a gold brick, and it's building the foundations of your eternal life. The third question, write down 3 positive and powerful word pictures about yourself. Draw them. For example, I am a bridge. I help people cross the bridge. I help people get over the rough spots in life. Now we're on the next chapter. His I am statements are what he became. I first became aware of I am statements when I was in junior and senior high school in the 50s. And I came across the books of a well-known member of the clergy, Norman Vincent Peale, who recently passed on in the last couple of years. And he wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, and then he wrote The Power of Positive Thinking for Young People. And I read both of his books, and that was the first time that anyone had taught me the word I am as a preface to a statement of being. So I would say that Norman Vincent Peale, bless his heart, was the individual who kindled in me an understanding of the word I am, and the name I am being the name of God. And that there was an empowerment in it, and that positive thinking about yourself, your world, and your life would propel you into positive actions, deeds, and a positive future. I came into this embodiment through parents with whom I had an extremely difficult karma. And that very difficult karma caused me to search. So I found Christian Science after or actually I was in Christian Science from the time I was 9, that I decided that that was the best teaching going on in my hometown. But then I realized that I needed more, and when I was 18 I found the I Am books in my mother's shelf. But I remember the days when I did I Am affirmations with Norman Vincent Peale, and I remember that they were empowering, that they were peaceful, and that they gave me a sense of myself. Do any of you remember the first time the name of God as I Am, or I Am that I Am, had meaning to you? How long ago was it? Just tell me how many years ago that that name came to you. You can just speak it out. 25 years? 30 years? 2.5 years? 1988? 1970? Did you feel an empowering when you were acquainted with the name of God as I Am?
Yes. Strong.
Very strong. And as we say it in our decrees, and we know to release the power of the spoken word, that we draw the energies and we don't just say something softly, but we say it with intensity, we can see how much it brings to us. And the greater the intensity of your prayers, the greater the response. And here it is, right in the book of Exodus, the very second book of the Bible, is this teaching. And we heard it in Sunday school. Moses said, "Whom shall I say sent me?" He says, "Tell them I Am hath sent you." So here we are. His I Am statements are what he became. In other words, conversely, we cannot become what we do not affirm in the name of I Am. We cannot become it because God empowers us to become what we are. Jesus did not look back on the events of his life and say, I must have been the Son of God. He declared himself to be the Son of God, and the proof followed. The proof followed. Jesus regularly visualized the success of his efforts. He used visualization. I declare a thing, and it is done for me. My word accomplishes that which I send it out to do. The difference between you and Jesus is that he believed in the power of his word, and he accompanied the spoken word with a visualization of success, always knowing that when he sent out the spoken word, when it was the will of God, there would be no impediment to it being manifest. I declare a thing, and it is done for me. This author has really captured the real teaching in that line. Does Jesus do it himself? No, he affirms it, and God fulfills it. God is the great doer through us. When we think we are the doers, in that sense of the word, we don't harness ourselves to the power of God. I declare a thing, and it is done for me. My word accomplishes that which I send it out to do. Probably many people would describe Jesus as one of the most humble beings who ever walked the earth. I don't necessarily agree with that myself. Yet consider what he said about himself in the Bible. Absolutely everything he said about himself was positive. I always do what pleases God. Sounds like a very prideful statement, doesn't it? I always do what pleases God. What if you told a party of people that you came over to your house that you invited, and you announced to them, I always do what pleases God? What do you think they would think of you? You have to know in your heart that you are always doing what pleases him. God always answers my prayers. If you put that sign out, you're going to have people in line. Was this conceit, or was it enlightened creativity and self-knowledge? It was enlightened creativity and self-knowledge. If you look at the Old Testament, you will read some of its most beautiful verses recited later by Jesus about himself. For example, his mission statement regarding bringing good news to others is taken from the prophet Isaiah. He internalized beauty and claimed it as his own. There's a proverb that says, A man's curses will fall and wrap themselves around him like a cloak. What a powerful visual image that is. What if every word we said fell and wrapped itself around us like a garment? What kind of wardrobe would we have? Words have power, and Jesus always spoke loving, powerful, and confident words about himself. He didn't keep quiet when he needed to defend himself in certain situations. In the situation of his trial, he said nothing except to Pilate, "Thou sayest." It is interesting to listen to the self-talk of super athletes. I once read an article in which one of the greatest female tennis players of all time reviewed a game that she lost. Every statement she made about herself was still positive. People who succeed speak well of themselves to themselves. Do you speak well of yourself to yourself? Nowhere in the gospel does Jesus put himself down. Jesus was full of self-knowledge and self-love. Do you love yourself? And do you have the full knowledge of yourself? His I am statements were what he became. Question 4. Whom do you tell yourself that you are on a daily basis? Try waking up in the morning and telling yourself who you are. Who am I? You know yourself by what you do, don't you? I'm a carpenter, I'm an engineer, I'm a housewife, I'm a real estate agent, I'm a dentist. This is what I do, and so this is what I am. If we do nothing, well, we don't have too many things to say about ourselves, do we? If each word you said about yourself fell and wrapped itself around you like a garment, what would your self-talk wardrobe look like? 6. What good, pure, true, and beautiful words do you feed your mind every day? Just think how we feed our minds with decrees. Do you see your decrees becoming actions, or do you just see them as words? You see them as instantaneous action, so that you speak and you see something happening before you, you visualize it happening. This is the 3rd chapter. He kept in constant contact with his boss. Each of us must answer to someone. Any 6th grader familiar with the food chain will tell you that even the king of the jungle ultimately becomes food for little insects. None of us is without someone who could ultimately eat us for dinner. In fact, when a person begins to think there was no one to answer to, problems really begin. Jesus knew who his boss was, and he kept in touch with him daily. Ed Koch, one of the most re-elected mayors of New York City, used to go around town asking the people he met, "How am I doing?" The folks loved him for it, and many considered his openness to be one of the keys to his popularity. Al Newhart, founder of USA Today newspaper, drove around the country asking people what kind of newspaper they'd like to read. This man, earning over $1 million a year in salary, considered his bosses to be the people who plunked the quarters into the newspaper vending machines. He took the time to stay in touch with the people he served. Very important of the 3 things we're working on. This is the one on relationships. The strength of relationships. An example of the consequences of not staying in touch occurred when the Board of Trustees for a National Medical Association decided to celebrate the organization's anniversary. They asked all members to donate 30% of their time to an anniversary gala. More than one state director told representatives from the national office where this plan was hatched that this plan was extremely unpopular with the state offices. The representatives, who often were hired just for their ability to say yes to the executive director, never mentioned the unpopularity of the plan to the board, as it was the directors pet project. When one newcomer attempted to bring it up at a board meeting, the director threw her such a look that she promptly shut up. The board held its great kickoff celebration, to which the national media and key government cabinet members were invited, but only 11 people showed up. 9 were board members. Group members had spent nearly $60,000 to promote their event, but failed to purchase a 2-cent cotton swab to clean out their ears before they launched it. The board members forgot to communicate with their bosses, who were the members of the association they were representing. They ruled by mirrors, not by windows. Jesus met with his boss daily, usually for hours. Nothing could interrupt the time that was pre-designated, set aside, and honored. As a leader, it is vitally important that you keep in touch with your boss on a regular, sacrosanct basis. Chances are your boss can provide an aerial view that will make your path more clear. Jesus kept in constant contact with his boss. Question: do you know who your boss really is? Now this is a very important question. Who governs you? Is it your carnal mind? Is it the dweller on the threshold? Is it your desires? Are your desires your boss? Who really is your boss? Who do you give allegiance to the last thing you do when you fall asleep at night? Who are you thinking of? Or what are you thinking of? Are you thinking of people you know? Are you thinking about angels? Are you thinking about God? Are you revolving problems, money matters? Do you disconnect from all of this and just talk to God? Is God the most important person to you in your life? Or is somebody or something that you want more important than God? Don't be afraid to look at that, because idolatry is the subject of the first commandment. The very first thing, where God says, I want all of you, not part of you. I'm a jealous God. I'm totally jealous. I won't share you with anyone else. And you cannot share yourself with anyone else. So we need to think about that, because when someone or something else is more important, we're really in serious trouble. We have to know who our boss is and talk to him. You know, in a sense, I'm the staff's boss. The staff has department heads in departments, and we have a board of directors and a legal structure. There are people who report to me constantly, interchange with me, get my feedback in a creative process where they present something and I can add something to it, and then as a result of that, they give more input, and we call it a mastermind alliance, and that's the book by Napoleon Hill. And it's a workbook, and it's a great book to read, and we've taught it at Summit University. I think we all know that we've had moments in our lives when somebody or something was more important to us than God. I think you should write about that in your private journal. I don't want to hear about it. You don't have to show it to anyone. But I think it's important to put down on paper those times when we have had in our lives when something or someone was more important to us. So this is question number 7. Do you know who your boss really is? 8. Draw a picture of your food chain. How would you draw a picture of your food chain? Any ideas? Yeah, a mind map. But what is the source of our food chain? Well, God doesn't plow the field and plant the grain and so forth. Well, what do you think food chain means in this context? Who's the most powerful? Since I can't hear any of you loud enough, maybe the TAs could repeat what people are saying. Who you are answerable to? The chain of command? Is that what you think the author is intending here? What? Does anyone here?
I think it means more of know where you stand in level comparison, know where you are in your life, and who can influence your life and make you do what you necessarily don't want to do, and how not to be on guard and know where you are amongst everyone that has influence in your life.
TAs, do you have your concepts of this? Draw a picture of your food chain. What would you draw as that picture? I'm not clear on what the author means myself. That's why I'm asking you. Hmm? Okay, so perhaps we're at the middle of the food chain where those above us control our lives and we control those who are beneath us. So are we on the low end of the food chain or are we on the high end of the food chain? Well, you know, the polar bear is considered at the top of the food chain. He is the most powerful animal, and everything comes down from the polar bear.
Yeah, but eventually, when he dies, he's taken over by horses or whatever. That's what I'm saying, that somewhere along the line, you're also, even the lowest becomes the highest. You look at the first chapter, and it says right here in the first paragraph, everyone has someone who brings to dinner, and the certificate nobody above us is talking to the dinner. It's almost like being on guard. First paragraph, you talk about it as well.
He said, I am. That's the first paragraph. That's the first page.
This chapter.
Oh, this chapter. Okay, let's go to this chapter. Each of us must answer to someone. Any sixth grader familiar with the food chain will tell you that even the king of the jungle ultimately becomes food for little insects. None of us is without someone who would ultimately eat us for dinner. Could ultimately eat us for dinner. In fact, when a person begins to think there is no one to answer to, problems really begin. So that's our answer on the food chain. Where are we in that chain? From the ant to the polar bear. Okay. And then 9, the question is, how regularly do you communicate with your boss? You know, we build friendships with people, and I know a lot of people put a lot of stock and a lot of time into making themselves popular with a lot of people. They may not be doing it with sincerity, but they make sure that they stroke the right people and maintain the right ties. And you know, I see people doing that within and without the community because they somehow always want to have a certain control. And so if they mix socially with people, then you know, they will always have a lot of people to fall back on. It's fine to have great relationships. We need to look at our motives. Okay, I'm just going to read one more page. He stuck to his mission. Jesus knew his mission statement, and he did not deviate from it. He declared that his mission was, in essence, to teach people about a better way of life. He saw himself as a teacher and a healer. An ancient adage says, if you want to defeat them, distract them. In the wilderness, Jesus was given several business opportunities that did not relate to his mission. Each of these opportunities was related to talents that Jesus had and used in some form or another during his tenure, but he resisted them because they did not fit his mission statement. Pause for a moment and consider the things Jesus did not do. Here is someone endowed with limitless power from on high. He could have done literally anything, yet he did not build a temple or a synagogue. He did not write or distribute books. He did not even heal all the sick people in the world. He did not go down to the graveyards and raise everyone from the dead. He did not build shopping malls. His mission was very specific. Jesus stuck to his mission. Question: what is your mission? Can you define it in 1 or 2 sentences? That's number 10. Question: do feelings stir inside you that suggest you might contribute to a better way of life for others? Probably can all write yes on that. Question: can you list opportunities currently in your path that might really be distractions? What are they? Can you list opportunities currently in your path that might really be distractions? What are they? You can't know if they are distractions if you don't know what your mission is and you don't know who you are. Then how will you know what are the things that are distractions that you need to get rid of? I made a certain decision today about publishing. I've been thinking about it for a week, a proposal that's come across my desk. I made a decision about that today, and it was a very necessary decision. So we have to know who we are, who our organization is, and what we want our organization to accomplish. You need to know yourself within the network of this organization, no matter where you live in the world, because it's a real connection for all of us. I have seen that many opportunities that come our way have to be discarded. And you have to wait for the right ones and then harness all your forces, all your staff to accomplish a certain goal. So opportunities appear like baubles and trinkets. They flash in the dark, and you say to yourself, well, if I take this opportunity, something good might happen. I might accomplish something. I might make some money. The question is it a distraction? I have seen people lose the path for not understanding that once you are on the path, you know who you are, you know what your mission is, and you know what you must do, then you cannot be distracted. And I think distractions, every time you start something and then stop, that's a distraction. Okay, you're on course and all of a sudden you get pulled over here. So it's a distraction. So what happens? You lose momentum. You've lost momentum then. So now to get back to the project after tending to this distraction, you have to build the momentum all over again. That's why people who accomplish things sequester themselves. And when they are working on an invention, working on a business, working on this, working on that, you don't hear from them. I've known people that were very, very successful who worked from morning till night all the days of their lives. Their goal was to make money. They're first-generation Americans, second-generation Americans. Their goal was to make money, and they made a lot of money because they put their entire heart, soul, and mind into making money, and they chose the right kind of businesses, and they expanded those businesses, and they made money. That was their mission, to make money. And so they succeeded, and succeeded well. And that's true of a lot of people whose American dream is wealth. But if we have the richest father in the world, we don't have to go out spending our whole life making money, because God gives us what we need. And we don't need a whole lot of wealth. We just need what it takes to do what we have to do. And He will supply that. So where are you on the path? And define your distractions. I'd like you to really do that, because sometimes people Twitter and twit about, and they see this thing and they see that thing. It's like a little baby. He sees one toy, then he sees the other toy, then he sees the next toy. And because we have Montessori, our children are trained to focus and learn from a very early age, and they have bits. And so the attention span of our babies is tremendous. is tremendous. I mean, they can sit quietly with a Montessori exercise under the age of 1. Or they can do bits and be totally absorbed for 20 minutes, a half hour of time on a single lesson. I mean, you would never think that babies do this unless you watch them and saw what can happen in a prepared environment. So, I think this concludes our interchange today, and you have time for a break and whatever else is going to happen next in your various classes. It's nice to be here. Thank you. We're dismissed for a break.